Ever felt like you've done everything right, built the career, made the money, checked all the boxes, and still felt like something was missing?
Like you're supposed to feel free, but instead, you're trapped by the very life you built.
That's the moment most people realize that financial independence isn't just about the money. It's about your identity, your purpose, and learning who you are when the titles and the paychecks disappear.
Today's guest, Whitney Elkins-Hutten, knows that feeling firsthand. She went from the chaos of her early real estate days to becoming one of the most respected investors and educators in the space. But what she learned along the way wasn't just about wealth. It was about finding permission to live life on your terms.
We're diving into what enough really means, why happiness can't be bought, and how to design a life that doesn't fall apart when changes hit.
So if you ever felt lost chasing success, this conversation is going to hit home.
This is the Fi Guys. Let's get into it. Well, to our audience members, I'd love to welcome Whitney Elkins-Hutten. Whitney, before we start off, could you just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what brings you on the podcast today?
Yeah, well, I'm a real estate investor. I'm also the director of investor education at passiveinvesting.com. My passion is to teach individuals how to turn their active income into passive income and long-term wealth. So they can have optionality in their work, buy back their time, retire. I started off my investing journey back in 2002, completely by accident. I bought a house with a significant other, and the relationship fell apart about a month later. And I had the house, thought it was going to break me, and got resourceful and completed the rehab on the house. I mean, psychedelic daisies painted all over the walls, green shag carpet straight out of the 1960s. Needed a lot
Love
of
it.
work. And anyways, when I completed that project, that was like the light bulb moment for me, where I was like, "Oh my goodness, I went to 8 years of school, post-secondary education, and, my identity is completely wrapped up in public health, and I made more money in that one transaction than I did in a year's worth of work that had me traveling 80 hours a week and not able to see my father while he was, um we didn't know at the time, but he was dying, but, wasn't able to see my family, as freely as I wanted to, and,
Mhm.
that was the light bulb moment for me that I actually didn't have to work 40, 50 hours or years. I could actually create income for myself outside of what I did for my day job, and from there, I mean, we can go down several different rabbit holes. I did several more live and flips and house hacks. I eventually transitioned into buy and hold real estate and scaled 40 BRRRR properties, or buying low, rehabbing them, putting a tenant in them, and then refinancing my cash back up. And then scaled a private equity firm with a couple partners, investing in multifamily real estate, and then hit an inflection point with COVID, where I really, was faced with, okay, you scaled all this, Whitney. Like, do you really want to keep doing the active thing, or do you want to do more passive? COVID was one of those really weird blessings for us as a family. It was so tragic for so many other people. I totally, want to empathize with everybody, but for us, it was oddly a blessing for us to kind of test drive our future life today. We were able to travel. Long story short, we really started scaling our passive real estate portfolio from there. We had already done a lot of passive investing, but really scaled from there. And really all of this in service of just having 100% control and choice on how we spend our time.
That's so cool. I want to go back to the beginning because something that I find when I'm coaching people is they're looking for permission to get started. Who gave you, Whitney, that permission? Who gave you that education to say, "Hey, you can do this"?
You know, uh, It's so funny because when I'm coaching my clients, they're stuck, and just like what you said, they're searching for permission, and you say, "I give you permission to do this," and they're like, "Oh, but I didn't need your permission." I'm like, "Exactly, you did it. You did not need our permission, but you just it's kind of like touching somebody on their forehead, like showing them the light." For me, I think that initial kind of inflection point was my realtor gave me the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Hmm.
And I read the book. Actually, I didn't read the book. I take that back. I read like the first 2 or 3 chapters. I'm like, I kind of get it, skimmed the rest, bought the first house. And then also got in my second deal. That's when I realized I didn't quite master all the principles from the book. The things went a little off the rails with the second deal. But I think that was the first time that somebody actually said, "Hey, listen, not only can you have a roof over your head, but you can do something outside of your day job to build your financial freedom." And it just gave me a vocabulary that I didn't have. I mean, my daughter, she's a, teenager. Like, they're not teaching them about personal finance or what cash flow is or financial freedom, financial independence. Like, none of that vocabulary is entered into the educational system. And so really it was more about somebody giving me a set of words to help actually, put in all these concepts that were swirling around in my head that I wanted into, like, actual fruition.
Yeah. I always feel like we live our life in stories, and the way that we tell those stories is through words. And if we don't have the word to be able to say, like, this is what I'm trying to do, or this is what I'm building for, then it's hard. We can't even explain it to anyone else, much less ourselves. So I think by being able to have that words, being able to understand the words of finance, and there's a lot of words in finance that you don't need to know. I mean, a lot of it is just like complex words that don't really matter in your day to day, but being able to understand your cash flow, being able to understand your debt, your assets, being able to understand what those things mean gives you the ability to move forward. Now, I think there's a lot of podcasts that will go on and they'll talk about all of the wins. Like, tell me everything about how much of a great person you are. But I know that life happens in the messiness. So I want to hear a little bit about that second property that you bought and what you learned in that, putting yourself in a bit deep, and how you got out of it.
Well, so I'll jump to the end. The What went wrong is I violated one of the immutable laws of real estate, which is location, location, location. You can't move a property, right? So, if you're going to be an investor, right? When you buy a property, you're not thinking it through the lens of what you want. It's what your end goal is going to be. Are you going to, flip it to another investor? Are you going to flip it to a owner occupied person? Are you going to rent it out? I had none of that in my vision. I just thought this was a really cool mountain house that I wanted to live in. And I would, rent out a room or two, and do what I did on the first property. That didn't happen. So it just didn't happen. So, but I mean, real estate can be pretty forgiving in a way. Generally with enough time, like, the valuation of a property, if maintained, can probably bounce back. So while it wasn't the home run that I was hoping for, I did, pretty much break even on the property.
Okay.
Now the real funny part of it, there is kind of like one of those funny, not funny stories, is I lived in the property for a couple years, rented it out, had trouble keeping roommates in there because it was, 4 miles outside of town, a mountain town, which is hard.
Yes.
If somebody doesn't have a car, like, they're not gonna bike 4 miles in the
Yeah, in
mountains
the
all the
mountains,
time.
up and down hills.
Yeah, up and down hills. Okay, so that was hard. So didn't know who my tenant was gonna be. Um, and my what tenants I were able to keep, they were very transient. So, I mean, I was keeping tenants for like 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. So it was like a revolving door. I finally decide that I'm gonna put the property up for sale. And, I immediately get an offer, that I thought was a lowball offer. And at the end of the day, it probably was true to market because I took the exact same offer a year later after fighting to have the property on the market for a full year. Now, when it finally goes under contract, though, um, it was with a newlywed or a couple that they were getting married very soon, and I think the soon-to-be husband really wanted to impress his father-in-law, so it just became a negotiation nightmare. And fortunately, I had an amazing realtor who just said, "Hey, Whitney, you know what? We've been at this for a year. I'm going to negotiate, he wants some certain repairs done. Let's just get a dollar amount. You say you're going to bring it to closing, and then he owns the rest of it, which was the best, the smartest move that I could have done, because all of those repairs, instead of costing $6,000, ended up costing $30,000. One of the repairs was a retaining wall. So the cabin is built into the side of the mountain.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, not into the mountain, but like it's on the side of a mountain. I had neighbors who had cabins above me. All of us have a retaining wall. And the neighbor above me had a tenant that lived in a school bus, literally a school bus. So the school bus is on top of a retaining wall that's probably from like 1920. Okay.
Nice.
Was it the most bomb-proof wall? No. Anyways, so this gentleman who's buying the property from me goes in, and we're talking $30,000 later, engineers, everybody signs off, and supposedly it's this beautiful retaining wall. And the whole entire time I'm going, it's the bus, move the bus, because they moved the bus above my neighbor's retaining wall and it started to fail. Okay, so we keep the bus off my retaining wall, property closes, the tenant moves her tenant back into position on the retaining wall after closing, because supposedly this wall's not going anywhere. Inside 24 hours, the bus is tumbled into the top of the roof of the property.
Oh my God. Did anyone get hurt?
Nobody got hurt. But I did get a call. So we closed on Friday at like 3. And I mean, my realtor is bouncing room and title are bouncing room to room, because like the process is so contentious. Nobody could be in the same room with each other. Or they thought we couldn't. I was just like, I just don't want to talk to the guy. So they're bouncing room to room, right? Property closes, everybody walks away. I'm laying on the couch, watching a movie, just kind of decompressing on Saturday mornings, like 11 a.m. And I get a call, my realtor, and I'm like, what? Like, well, did we forget to sign something? And I just hear all this yelling and commotion in the background, and what sounded like a shotgun being pumped. I'm like, what is going on? They were like, yeah, you know that bus? I'm like, yeah. They're like, it's in the roof of the property. I'm
What was
like,
the shotgun?
oh, that was the tenant that lived in the bus that didn't want to get removed from the bus.
While it's on someone's roof, it's like,
Well,
this is my new house.
So I was like, am I at fault? And they were like, no, but I thought you would want to know. And I'm like, let's never talk about this ever again. I'm done. But that was a lot of lessons in learning, right? Like mutable law of real estate, how was I going to exit the property? Who was my ideal tenant? Who was going to be the ideal person that I was going to sell to? And then just all the lessons and learnings that I had, like through the whole contractual process, it really set me up well to be able to handle a lot of the, just real estate comes with bumps in the road. It's not a matter of if something will happen. Will there be an eviction? Yes, there will be at some point in time. It's a matter of when.
Yeah.
And so being able to problem solve through that and not taking it personally, actually.
I think that's a good, not just lesson for real estate, but for all of life, is that it's messy and that you're going to learn through the trying and through the messing up, through the not having the perfect plan, and then figuring out along the way. And then in hindsight, you're like, oh, that was the perfect plan, but you could have never known that until you get started. And that's something that I find with a lot of people is like, I'll get started investing. I'll get started with all these things when I have the perfect plan. And there's this magical when date. And I mean, the way that I look at it is that when is just an excuse. It's an excuse to not change your life today, because
It's avoiding.
it's avoiding it, because we all know that when's never going to happen. Like, because when you get there, there'll be another when. There'll be another time in the future that you can put that in. So I think that's super interesting. And another thing that you touched on, you said you got to see like what you were moving towards during COVID. You got to see like what that looks like as like a mini retirement. And that's something that I've been wanting to do a podcast on, the idea of doing a mini retirement, not waiting till you're 65 or till retirement to get that exposure, but it allows you to see, is this the life that I really want? Because so many people are saying like, oh, when I get to 65, when I finally retire, I'll be able to like live in a cabin, or I'll be able to go sail a boat, be able to do all these things. And it's like, okay, have you ever tried that? You ever just like rented a boat and see if you like it? Because if you're going towards this goal and you finally get there, that's where I've seen a lot of people in financial independence screw up. They get to that goal. They finally have the magic number in their bank account. And then they're like, I'm going to just chill for a week. And then they're like, this is really boring. I'm going to go do the other things that I said I was going to do. Oh no, I don't like this. Financial independence is a farce. Like all of it was a farce. And now I have to just like, I don't have a job. I have zero purpose in life. So I got to go and like off myself. Where had you taken little breaks in between to test what you like, you get that exposure. You get to see what might my plan be after it all ends. So tell me about that year that you had.
Well, I would love to kind of interject a little bit of a joke here because it plays in here. Like during COVID, there was a video meme going around. Probably got the term wrong. I'm not like, but anyways, a little video going around. And there's this guy sitting there, and they were like, okay, plan A, option A is you get to be locked in your house with your family for a month. And then they go, option B, and he goes, B. He immediately says B. So I like laughed at that, right? Like, that was kind of all of our experiences during COVID. Probably for like the first 4 or 5 days, we're like, oh man, it's like a mini vacation. No, we get to be with our families and like we don't have to go to school, don't have to go to work. And then like reality sets in. And you're like, oh, this is not as cool as I thought it was. For me, like I really appreciated that. We did a lot. My daughter homeschooled or schooled from home. We did not do the schooling, not cut out for that part. I knew that. But anyways, schooled from home. And then my husband and I were both able to work remote. And so we continued working. So we didn't ever stop working, but we got to travel and play. And that was fantastic. But after like 3 years of doing that, it got very cumbersome and very tiring.
Yeah.
And we just got to the point where we're like, okay, this is kind of cool. We've done this. So it's almost like we got it out of our system, but it gave us time to think about like how do we really want to do it when we do retire? Um, and so also during this transition, I'm wrestling with I'd already wrestled with one question years ago, which is the identity part. And the other question is, what is enough?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when people are moving into, on their journey to financial independence, financial freedom, uh, they wrestle with the question is like, why on earth would I build this portfolio that could support me in my ability to be able to retire? Because I don't want to retire. I am a doctor. I am a CEO. I am a high earning worker. Like, this is my love. This is what I went to school for. This is like, they say their purpose, but don't confuse strengths with what actually your passion is. And so really that's what we have to untangle. That's the first step. How do we untangle the identity from what your day job is?
Yeah.
If you are so lucky enough to have stepped into your passion like right after college, kudos for you, high five. Like that's it. Most people don't though. And so we have to kind of untangle that identity because we want to find the role that you are passionate about, essentially what you would get paid for or you would show up for, whether you got paid for it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Then, when we're scaling a portfolio, we have to understand what is enough. That's the other trap that I see, people fall into. They hit financial security, financial vitality, financial independence, and they go for financial freedom. And then they just keep going and going and going. And like, I'll kind of like back to the when, like, I will retire when X, Y, and Z happens. Well, that retirement will never work for them if they haven't unhooked their identity and figured out what their passion is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love this conversation. This is exactly what like I do in my coaching program. So I would love to hear about your thoughts on identity. Cause I always ask the question to my clients is, are you what you do? Are you what you have? Or are you who you are? And too many people, when you're like, well, who are you? And they're like, well, I'm an accountant. I own a boat. Like I'm a boat guy. And it's like, okay, like, but if I went to your best friend and I said, hey, who is Joe Schmo to you? They wouldn't say, oh, well, Joe Schmo owns a boat and he's an accountant. Like if they did, like, that's probably not the friend that you want to keep around. Like, but they would say like, oh, like he's compassionate. He's always there to help me. You need to look at that in yourself. What person are you? Who are you as a person? Because no one on their deathbed is going to be like, well, at least I was an accountant for 40 years. Like I really made it. Like or I had a boat. So I was better than everyone. Like no one thinks that at their deathbed. And if they do, again, not the person you want to surround yourself with.
Mhm.
So how do you think you find that identity? Because it's difficult. I mean, I think the hardest thing in life, and this is what the Stoics talk about, is know yourself, know thyself. Like
Mhm.
our boy Socrates preached it thousands of years ago, and everyone hears that and they're like, I know myself. Like, of course I do. Like, who else do I talk to more than me? And then when you actually question that a little bit more, you're like, oh, maybe I don't know why I do what I do. Maybe I'm just going through life reacting to whatever and not really understanding why I'm doing what I did. What in my past, what about my genetics makes me be this way? And can I have the ability to change it if I so want to?
Mhm. Well, that's the coolest thing is I feel like every decision you make in life, generally is non-permanent. Mo 97% of the
Right.
decisions you make, right? You can undo pretty much everything, right? You can change your mind. So everything's, how I approach it, a mini experiment.
Hmm.
We get to test, we get feedback. Now, I think it's really hard to, like, guide somebody from, like, "Hey, you see yourself as an accountant, right? And then let's unhook your identity. Let's figure out who this person is over here." We have to lead them through a process.
Hmm.
And it has to be like mini steps. And it has to be something that they can achieve, right? They can actually see into. And so I love some of the work that out of the concept, the one thing, Jay Papasan, Gary Keller. And and I think a lot of people, Brene Brown starts with this, but I've really incorporated it into my coaching is like, let's start with your core values. Let's take a whole list of um, nouns and not quite adjectives, but I don't know. I'm not an English major, guys, so sorry. But anyways, like, let's take a word bank and like figure out which of these words kind of resonate with you. And then let's try them on, date them for a while, see what fits. And what most people find out of like 100-word lists that they'll end up with like 5 to 7 piles of words that kind of all come together. But I really encourage you to get that down to 3 words. Okay. Now, when you're first doing this, you're going to get 3 piles probably. And in that pile, you're going to continue to circulate words until you land on the one that actually like fits you. For me, that is like the decision making process. It's the filter, right? So we haven't really attached it to who you are, but like moreover, like how you think and how you operate, right? So I don't think as a public health worker anymore, right? I don't necessarily think as a mom. My decision matrix comes from my values, which are strength, light, and connectedness. So we haven't really gotten to like, is that who I am? No, but we can at least get a little bit of insight and a glimpse to like how my mind works, how I value things, and also how I'm going to interact with other people. Because my husband doesn't have the same words. My daughter doesn't have the same words. So that would be like kind of like exercise number 1. Exercise number 2, um, there's a couple different ways to go about it. Write your own eulogy,
Hmm.
right? Some people are like, too morbid, Whitney, not gonna do that. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's not go to the deathbed. Let's go 10 years out. Like, put a stake in the ground. Who is that person looking back at you now? Like, what has that journey been? Right. And that way we can understand what you're working towards. And what you're going to find out is that person 10 years from now, they are concerned about their health, their relationships, the adventures that they've had, how they're giving back in the world, the experiences they have. They're not talking about, hey, man, I got that promotion at work. Awesome. They're not talking about that sort of stuff. They're talking about the intangibles. And that those 2, the core value exercise and the 10-year vision plays so well into helping somebody really start down that path to figuring out who they are and beginning to kind of unravel the identity. Because, if you stay stuck in this identity that you've created for yourself, it can be very limiting. Like if you see yourself as an accountant, you're taking a chance on buying a fix and flip at auction probably not gonna be in your DNA. Why?
Yeah.
Because you're an accountant, you crunch numbers. You spend a lot of time there. But there's probably somebody buried inside of you that would go do that if they had the skills, the knowledge, skills, and network to do it. Like, let's go find that person. So those are a couple different ways to kind of like start somebody down that path. And then, then the fun begins, right? Because then the light bulb comes on, the doors start opening in their mind, and we can really start having to, making some real progress there.
Yeah. I love that. One thing that I've been working on a lot with my clients has been, I think we all know like diversification is kind of like that golden egg that like it's just there and it's great. And we talk about gold diversification in terms of your investments, diversification in terms of the properties that you own, just diversification. But no one talks about diversification of your identity, because
Ooh.
too many people will go and say like, "Oh, I'm a mom." Well, eventually, like if you're a good mom, your kids will leave the nest. Like that's the goal of being a mom. And at that point, you have this crisis of confidence of like, well, who am I? And then we have those midlife crises, or I am an accountant, and then one day you lose your job, and now you're not just dealing with oh, now I'm unemployed, but now it's like, who the hell am I?
Hmm.
But when you get to have this diversification of identities, like for me, like I'm a surfer, I'm a jujitsu instructor, I'm a podcaster, I'm a financial coach, like I'm a father, I'm all of these things. So therefore, if like, I don't know, my leg gets broken, I can't go jujitsu. Okay, cool. Like the surfing's probably not there for a little while too, but at least I'm still all these other things that I could get to hang my hat on. And I think by being able to diversify and show yourself that I am more than just this one monolith, it also gives you the ability to be like, I think like before I wasn't a surfer, before I wasn't all these things, and I add that to my identity. What else can I add to my identity? And it gives you that permission to try on these different hats, as it were, to see, can I be this? And maybe you try something, you're just like you said, to an experiment, you get to be a scientist in your life. Let's see what it would be like to be I don't know, a 10K or someone that runs up for a bunch of 14ers. I'll try on that hat and I'll be like, no, it's not me. Like I got it. I tried it. And that's okay to try on those things in life and get to test it to really get to know yourself.
Or
What do you
even
like
just
and
to
don't?
do it for a season, right? And just be like, hey, I did that. What else is there? And the to stack on that, you said you mentioned the broken leg. I mean, we can even extrapolate why this work is so important. We can extrapolate it further because, like, I'll tell a story. My father, I think he struggled with Parkinson's. So I think he wanted to, he was almost my age. Oh my gosh. I just realized, connected the dots here. Okay. About my age, he realized his company, was a VP of sales, worked his way up, been climbing the corporate ladder his whole life. And they handed him his resignation. They said, thank you so much for your years of service. They laid off 5 of the VPs. All of them had health issues, right? So now we've got this whole lawsuit going on in ADA and all this sort of stuff. But my dad was depressed for like a year. I mean, he was the type of guy, I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Like, I'll figure this out, right? Like, he worked his way through it, but like, he just did not know which way was up. And it took him so long. And when you hit that, will that type of low, it can permeate through the family unit. It can hurt your health. It accelerated his health decline as opposed to giving him the ability to really create space to do the work that he needed to do to keep himself healthier. So it's really important work to do.
Yes.
Here's the thing. You may, at the end of the day, say you're a doctor, you unhook your identity from medicine, you may still practice medicine, right? We're not saying that you don't do that, but that, like you said, diversify. I love that word.
That's one of the funniest things that I find when it comes to that with financial independence. Like so, just so you know, like a little bit about my finances. Like me and my wife were something called Coast Financial Independence. We don't need
Uh-huh.
to save another dollar for our retirement, and we will be able to retire very, very comfortably. And so when I say that, it's like, so I don't need to work if I don't want to. So people say, like, oh, Chris, you say you're financially independent, that you're still working. So like, I need to go and take your financial independence card, and like the financial independence police are going to come and arrest you because like you said you're this and you just can't do any other way. And I think we as human beings, we love black and white. Like we our brains take up so much cognitive load, and whenever there's that messy middle, it's a lot of cognitive load. So our brains just love, it's black, it's white, that's what it is, you're this or you're that. And unfortunately, majority of life is somewhere in the middle, and you need to be able to open yourself up to that, to be in that middle place, and that you can do these things, you can try on these hats, You can still practice medicine even though you're not fully licensed practicing medicine. You can still help, you can still consult, you can still be financially independent and and still continue to make money. Because the crazy part is the kind of person that hears this message of financial independence, hears this message of passive investing, ability to take control of your life, and then goes out there and actually figures it out and does it, that's not going to be the person that's going to get to 40 and be like, all right, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to do anything for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
Like that's just not that person's drive. And I think that's okay. I think we need to normalize that conversation that that's okay. That is honestly normal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been financially independent since 2017 and financially free since 2018. And what is it, 2025? Like we're still growing at the clip and pace that was when I was scaling. No, but we continue to grow and scale. And part of that is in service of others, right? Um, I love what I do. I love talking to people about taking their active income and turning it into passive income. Like, I think it's amazing, right? It's so empowering. My husband, he still works for the government. He's a forester. And, our ability to, survive, financially free, being financially free, he is working the job. He's still I mean, he could be, like, the highest level of the, government, like, he could continue to climb the corporate ladder, but he hit a certain level that, if he goes past this, there are no jobs that are in the field. So his job has him walking around every day in the forest, and he loves it.
Yeah. And
So
how cool is that to be able to have that ability to just to do what you want and to have the optionality that if one day he decides, I'm done with this, he
yeah,
can just do that. And same with you. And I think that's so cool. And that's what I say whenever we talk about financial independence, because the FI guys is an offshoot of the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And we
mhm,
reject the retire early because we really believe that to retire is to expire. But financial independence is about the optionality. It's about the freedom to do what you want when you want, because you might love being whatever it is that you are. Maybe you're the best accountant, the best doctor, the best whatever, and you're one boss away from hating your existence. Like you're
mhm,
one moment away from someone just saying like, hey, we need you to come in on Saturdays at 8 a.m. And now with financial independence, you have the ability to be like, nope. Like if we talk about having FU money, you need to be able to say FU and just like, I'm
mhm,
not going to do that because I can. And
mhm.
that's the nice thing. Cause too many times, just like your father experienced, you might be loyal to a company, but is that company loyal to you? And I would argue very rarely is it, if ever.
Yeah, I mean, but again, my husband works for the government. I mean, at the beginning of this year, I mean, you know, everybody knows this story, the Department of Government Efficiency, we're just gonna let that word just lay right there. But everybody in his world was panicking, and did we hated to see what was happening. But we knew, like, okay, great, like if you're not gonna stay at the Forest Service, okay, great, then what's next? We toyed around buying a mountain bike shop. So, my husband kinda, like, on his nights and weekends, kind of explored that opportunity, and it was just like, "Nope, nope, that's not for me. I'm not a business owner," "Whitney can do that. I don't wanna do that," right? Like, so, he really got to kind of think into that. So sometimes it has to do with our work, but sometimes it has to do about outside circumstances as well. And so, again, if somebody's like resisting this, you just don't know if it's going to be your health challenge, a spouse's health challenge, a parent passes away. I mean, I had my husband break his neck and my mom pass away in the same week. And I had a
Wow.
4-year-old daughter at home and I was working full time. And at that time, we had just hit financial, independence, and it was so empowering for me to be able to call up my boss and be like, "Hey, I don't wanna quit, but I need 6 months off.
Yeah.
I got some stuff to take care of. Here's what's going on." And of course, I was protected by FMLA and all that sort of stuff, like, I had government protections, but I was just like, "You need to do what's best for you and your company."
Yeah.
I was like his right-hand man, and he was like, "Okay, great, your job will be here whenever you get back." He was like, "Do you mind answering an email or 2, like, once a week?" And I'm like, "I can handle that." He was like, "Great."
And
You know?
having that power, that knowledge that even if it doesn't go that way. Because like too many people think like, oh, I'm going to negotiate, but you can't negotiate if you're from a place of weakness.
Mhm.
And like in that and financial independence, having that little bit of a buffer, it gives you that power. It gives you that ability to say like, hey, because no, the worst thing you can do is be like, hey, I'm going to quit. Or like, but oh God, don't call my bluff. Like, because they're going to know. And if they do it, then you're like, okay, fine. I was just joking. Like, I do need to work here. Don't do that.
Mhm.
Now you've lost all of it. I want to move on to another point. You talked about the identity part, but you mentioned something that is kind of my goal for 2025, and that is figuring out this magical word of enough. And I think I'm getting pretty close. And I'd love to have just a talk about what we've found around coaching people to, and even for yourself, that magic word of enough. Because
Mhm.
before we get there, I found that when I was a financial advisor, I call myself a reformed financial advisor now, but now as a financial coach and consultant, and I still do some advising, is people will come to you and they'll ask you millions of questions about their investment portfolio, about retirement, about estate planning, about all this stuff. And at the end of the day, they're really asking two questions to you. And that is, am I going to be okay? And how much is enough?
Mhm.
And those two questions can't be answered by some guy in a suit, can't be answered by anybody. Like that can only be answered by the person asking the question. Are you going to be okay? And how much is enough? Like your portfolio is going to be okay unless we have a nuclear apocalypse. And at that point, are you going to be okay? Like you have to make that decision. I can't guarantee what the future holds. No one can. And anyone that tells you that they do, you should run the hell away from them because they're going to try to sell you something most likely here in the next 5 minutes. But
The
yeah, I'd
pitch
love
is
to kind of,
coming.
yeah, I'd love to explore that concept of enough with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, um, I was working I mean, guys, anybody listening to this, coaches have coaches. Like,
Yep.
everybody has a coach, right? So, my coach, whenever I was exploring this, first of all, he brought up the word enough. Like, what does that actually mean to you? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. He was like, okay, well, great. Like, what is your 10-year vision? What are your core values? Like, let's think into the 10-year vision. Like, uh, w- what would it take to fund that? And that was really kind of one of the core questions. A lot of this boils down to math, and then half of it boils down to your psyche,
Hmm.
right? And so most people are don't even do the math part, right? They're like, I want you ask them, okay, what does financial independence mean to you? Like, how much do you think you
$15
make? Oh,
million. Dollars. It's just,
or 10K a month. Well, great. How did you get at that? Well, I don't know. It sounded great.
yep.
They're borrowing somebody else's idea. No, we would actually have to know what our life costs. And um, think into the future. What does that life cost at 10 years? Bring it back to the 5 year. On your path to that 10-year vision, what does that life cost at 5 years? Now bring it back to like where you're at today. Like, what is the cost of your life today? That's the question that 99% of people cannot answer. They were like, "Ooh, I think it costs 8 to 10,000 a month." I'm like, "Well, is it 8 or 10? Because that's a 20% spread."
And what I find is a lot of people, like if you walked up to a child, right, and you ask the child, like, what would make you happy in like life? They'd be like, oh no, 16 candy bars. And it's almost and like you as an adult, you laugh, you're like, haha, that's so cute that you think that. And it's the exact same thing that you do with an adult. How much
Mhm,
money would you need to be happy? 15 million. Like, where'd you get that number from? It's might as well say 15 candy bars. Just we all as adults just go like, oh, okay, like at least that sounds reasonable.
mhm.
15 million sounds better than 15 candy bars, but essentially they're the exact same thing. They're just a shot in the dark, hoping that it's like this is gonna be it, I think.
Well, I was talking to one of my coaching clients yesterday, recently onboarded, and we were working through her vision, and she's done an incredible amount of work. We know how much her life costs right now, okay? Uh But then I said, "Okay, how much do you wanna be bringing in, like, passively, in 10 years?" And she said, $1,000,000. I'm like, "Well, how did you get at that?" She goes, "Well, I wanna travel more, I wanna give away a little bit more." And I'm like, "So So you're bringing in just around $300,000 passively right now, but we want to get to $1 million. We need to know, like, is this number 300,000 today good? And then we need to, because the moves that we make to get from $300,000 passively to $500,000 passively over 10 years is a very different from $300,000 today to $1 million passively. And so, um, more than likely, we're going to have to take more active business development choices, royalties, build more active streams of income and then farm them out in a passive manner. As opposed to, like, if we know that that 10-year vision is actually $500,000 a year, we probably could get at that just by purely reinvesting and compounding. But you have to know the cost. If you don't define it appropriately, you're going to be taking the wrong actions to get there. So that's where we have to do some math. I'm sorry, guys. You have to do some math.
Yeah, and like the nice thing about the math is it's not as scary as you think it is. It takes some tracking, it takes a little bit of time, but it's not like it's really you set this up one time and you just get the hell out of its way. And you just
Mhm.
let it kind of work, and it's so counterintuitive because how many times in life is life like that? You get to just set something up once and walk away. Like if I was like, I want to be a football player, I just can't be like, all right, so I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to walk onto the compound. I'm going to do it. But that's how it kind of is with your finances. You can set it up one way. And if you want to be the active person, that works too. Or you can be the passive person, and that works too. And you get to focus on where you want your energy to go in life. But what I found for myself is at the end of the day, if you've let the finances take care of themselves and you focus on living a better life, more money flows that way than focusing so much on making more money. It just doesn't seem to flow, at least for me in my life and what I've seen.
Well, here's another exercise I like taking my coaching clients through. It's based off a workshop that I went to several years ago, but you really, when we think about happiness, and I know we're playing around with the word enough, but like I'll kind of, sometimes enough and happiness get kind of, you know mixed together.
Mhm.
If we're talking about happiness, the three things that lead to majority of someone's happiness are the experiences they have, the growth they have or want, right? If you're like my husband, he's just like, it has to be all about mountain bikes. That's how he wants to grow, right?
Mhm.
And then how we give back, right? It may not be like, do you have the best clothes, or the best haircut, or the best house, or whatever, but it's usually in one of those three categories. And that in and of itself allows us to focus our finances to be more in line with what actually truly gives us joy in life. And when we can kind of, touch that joy, and it's not permanent, and it's goes up and down, highs and lows all the time, then we find that we can kind of, again, like we were entangling ourselves from our identity. We can also untangle ourselves from the physical manifestation of money, like the cars, the houses, the clothes, the shoes, right? We
Yeah.
might be like, appreciate fashion, not Versace, right?
Yeah, and that's so perfect because too many people they'll tie their whole identity up in rather than again we'll switch it from who what I do to what I have, and
Mhm,
now you're tying yourself to that identity. And the thing is, we are social animals. Like as human beings, we've developed over 300,000 years to be these social animals. And one of the biggest ways that we know where we are in the pecking order of this social order is based off the things that we have, based off of our ability to go out into the world and create more value. And the messed up thing about life is that yes, the money it's quantifiable. So if you want to say that money is the most important thing, like you are quantifiably better than me at this point in our existence. And that's good. It gives us a nice, easy way to put ourselves into this pecking order. But is that what the most important thing about life is? Because you can't quantify your relationship with your husband. I can't quantify the relationship with my wife, the relationship I have with my kids, my friendships, my health. And
mhm,
all of those things I would say are far more important than how much money do I have compared to me and you or compared to my neighbor.
mhm.
Yet all of us default to that simple thing of how much money do I have in order to say, am I good? Am I worthy? Do I have enough or do I not? Based off of one metric. Well, just like we talk about diversification, you diversify the metrics and say, like, am I in that place of enough? Because in my estimation, if you're saying that I'll know when I have enough money, you'll never get there
Mhm.
because there is not enough money in the world. I think that the word enough, honestly, is a trap until you come to the realization that you are enough, who you are fundamentally. Because enough in Buddhism is dukkha, like going through life with this unsatisfactoriness. Because every time you attain enough, the enough grows to the next thing. Enough can never be attained because it's the cycle of enough is that it must grow. Greed must grow.
Mhm. Ooh, I actually see it very different, not from like a religious perspective, but I'm picking up what you're laying down for sure. I think, I see it as a definition shift, right? Not so much that enough is bad. It's just that we need to redefine what we need to define for ourselves what enough is and move it from the dollar amount, like you were saying, to put it into more of the put it into a language that actually speaks to our soul,
Mhm.
right? Um, a boat, I'm, maybe there's somebody out here, buying a boat does not speak to a soul, my soul. We had to get a new car recently. That does not speak to my soul. Do I like the new car? Cool, but like that's gonna wear off. The trip I took with my daughter and my husband, he went too, but he went mountain biking. My daughter and I climbed the Chief in Squamish, Canada this summer. We worked hard for it. We did 13 pitches. That is an experience I will carry for the rest of my life. My
Mhm.
daughter will carry that for the rest of her life. Right. So those are the things. It's moving from the tangible, what we can trade and barter with, and putting it into something that we can no longer trade and borrow because it's ours. It is mine. It is my experience.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.